the 20 and the 10, and look at that, he moves his way into the...
Hello, everybody. Welcome to 49ers University, presented by Shanalytics, let's say. I'm your host, Ben Meyerson. I'm here with my co-host today, Vinny Saglambeni. Vinny and I have been doing this for the entire season. If anyone hasn't watched, we've been doing these 49er games, these Mondays after the game, since about mid-season, really, or the beginning of the season, I should say, rather. But this is the first Monday, Vinny, that we're not going to be the team that is playing this week. And the 49ers are out of the playoffs. They lost in the NFC Championship game, and we got quite the Super Bowl matchup, Vinny. We're going to have Cincinnati Bengals, Los Angeles Rams, two teams, by the way, the 49ers have beaten this year. What do you think of this matchup? Actually, no, first of all, what do you think about the Cincinnati Bengals? Because we've been focused on the NFC, the Rams. We've talked about plenty enough. We've covered them. We don't need to talk about those Los Angeles Rams. We know them very well. But this path that the Bengals have taken to the Super Bowl, it's fascinating, Vinny. And it's really interesting to see a franchise, to me, go from number one overall pick, worst team in the league, to 2 years later, you're going to the Super Bowl with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and really this excellent team that, I think the Cardinals, right? They went all in this offseason, Vinny. They went after J.J. Watt. They brought in different running backs, A.J. Green. Think about all the players they added, the center. The Bengals, they went all in, but they didn't do the conventional route, Vinny. They didn't go and spend all the money they could in free agency. They certainly spent money in free agency. You think of Trey Hendrickson in specific. They brought in guys like Eli Apple, guys who not necessarily the rest of the league was buying in on them, And it's kind of funny to look at that team. And obviously they make the home run draft pick, selecting Jamar Chase, 5th overall, who not only is broken every receiving record for a rookie in terms of the regular season, but now he owns all those postseason records as well. Man, this is such a great matchup and just a really great story, first of all, for the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow, I mean, talk about come back from the depths of hell, right? I mean, this is a guy who was pushed back on the Ohio State depth chart. He never got his chance, and then he finally does, and I mean, look what he's done with it. So everyone in the comments, let us know, first of all, who you think is going to win the Super Bowl, what bets you're taking, what you think the score is going to be. But Vinny, man, what a story for the Cincinnati Bengals this year.
Yeah. And it's crazy to think that even the NFC and AFC championship games were only 2 weeks ago. It seems like it's so long ago.
Oh my gosh,
that those games actually happened. But yeah, everything looks to point that the Rams have the clear advantage in this game. And
right?
like you just look at, them playing in their home stadium, the coaching advantage and just the talent that's on that roster, you feel like that they're the clear advantage, the clear, favorites. And I think they are in the terms of spreads there. I think they're 4.5 point favorites right now. But time and time again, Joe Burrow, but then you look at the Bengals, right? They beat the Raiders at home, right? In a close game, almost came down to the last play. Then you beat the Titans on the last play. Then you march into Kansas City and you beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, right? Those are not easy games that they had to play during this
Vinny,
time.
Not only that, but in the last few weeks of the season, right? I believe week 17, to clinch the division, they beat Kansas City at home on a last second similar situation like you were talking about. So, they beat the Chiefs twice this season. Like you said, they beat the Titans. They beat the Raiders. The Titans on the road, too. I mean, this is a team that hasn't had a home game since that wild card weekend against the Raiders. And I know everyone talks about the 49ers, West Coast team traveling all around. Well, I mean, hey, look at what the Bengals have been doing. I mean, obviously Tennessee's not that far of a flight, right? Kansas
Yeah.
City, it's probably easier to manage, but wow, I mean, this is the one team, who's they are considered one of the cheaper franchises, right, Vinny? Their owners are supposed to be all about the bottom line. They don't have an outdoor practice facility. This is the same franchise who, quote unquote, wasted Carson Palmer's career, just got him in and didn't do the right things to support him. In fact, I remember I myself, Vinny, I wrote a story about 2 years ago when Joe Burrow was, or 3 years ago now, sorry, when Joe Burrow was getting drafted, that why would he want to be a part of this franchise? And now look at where they are. The executive, or the GM of the Bengals deserves executive of the year. And you talk about all the matchups, all the star power that the Rams have. There have been plenty of teams who have had better star power than the Bengals this season at many different points, Vinny. But I think what separates the Bengals from other teams who are in that same level is they're not only are they great in the passing game, but they're completely dominant and they can take over games that way, right? There are teams who have weaknesses in the NFL who like everyone always points to the Bengals offensive line and it's one of the worst in the league. There's those really funny charts from before the NFL draft of the Bengals where it's like Joe Burrow throwing to no one with the offensive line blocking, Joe Burrow getting knocked back, and Jamar Chase running the other way, right? The way they built this team, it's interesting in that everything went right for them. And Joe Burrow, I mean, he's just been a huge part of the turnaround for this franchise. And this is just one of the greatest stories in sports in the last few years. Joe Burrow.
Yeah, and the funny thing too is that both teams, this is their best chance to win the Super Bowl. I think.
Absolutely.
I don't know, and it's hard to. I think
I agree.
It's easier to guarantee it, like kind of guarantee it a little bit for the Rams next year, but for the Bengals, this is their prime opportunity now to get that Super Bowl because you really don't know what is to come in the future of this team. And I was talking about it earlier today with one of my buddies. Like, I don't know people here that follow soccer or like Premier League soccer or things like that. There was a team in 2016 named Leicester City who had 5,000 to 1 odds to win the Premier League and, filled with all these bigger teams. And the Bengals feel like the Leicester City of, this year. And
Vinny, I think they had longer odds even. If it just real quick.
I'm not. And then on the contrary, you look at the Rams.
They had 8,000 to 1 odds to make it to just to win the AFC this year, not even to win the Super Bowl. So that's even longer odds than Leicester City, who you're right. It was one of the storied and
that whole 2016 sports year was just crazy in general too. But looking at the Rams as well, they're kind of like I feel like they're Man City or like Man United on the other end, just getting big name guys and hoping that, that those kind of moves like work out, not using like as much as like development on like youth players or like, for instance, in the NFL, like draft picks, but just, wanting just to get the best players on your team. And with that, I think you can see a little bit of a change as to how football is viewed with either team that wins, right? Like, I think you look at the Bengals, if they win, like, it just further cements the notion that when you get the quarterback, that's the guy that you need to trade for. So maybe more people look to trade, draft picks to try to get those top end guys in the future. Or you look at the other side of it, if the Rams win, how does that change teams' approaches to drafts in general by not having as much draft picks and things like that? So it'll be very interesting to see who wins. I think the total points are 48.5.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the total points. I think it's going to be under that. I'm going to go 24-17 Rams win. I just think it's going to be too hard for me not to say that Sean McVay gets his first Super Bowl win. I think as much as it pains me to say being an United fan, I think it's the first of many for Sean McVay. I think he's too good.
Oh, that stings to hear, Vinny. Honestly,
it stings to hear, but
and you know what? I'm I'm in a similar boat. I think it's going to be an under, and I think it's going to be a very close game. But I actually am going to go the other way. I think the Bengals win this game. And
God, that would just be. By the way, sorry to cut you off. That would be so electric if the Bengals won the Super Bowl. That would be crazy.
You know, people talk about the Dallas Cowboys as America's team. The Cincinnati Bengals would be
Joe Burrow is America's player.
Exactly. Joe Burrow is everyone's favorite player right now. He's my mom's favorite player right now.
Yeah, you know, he's literally everyone. I tweeted that the other day. Like everyone's favorite player that's not from their team is Joe Burrow, and it's crazy to see how quickly he's become that presence in the NFL. Just because I think we knew him in college, especially that senior year. I guess for whatever reason, analysts and ourselves kind of overlooked the idea that he threw 60 touchdowns in his senior season and was the dominating force in beating that Clemson team with Trevor Lawrence and everything like that. So either team, I think, is deserving of the Super Bowl victory, and it'll be cool it helps the Niners in a way with either team winning. I think, in the sense that that you can beat these level caliber teams, but if the Rams were to win, that just makes the NFC West look that much better. So
yeah. Well, and we'll certainly see how it all plays out for Sean McVay. It's interesting, the Sean McVay Zach Taylor relationship.
Yeah.
There's so many little things in this game that are,
and that's another thing too. Like that's another thing too that puts the. I think there's like an X factor in both of these coaches, right? Like both of these coaches, I think, are going to be X factors, right? You look at Sean McVay. I think this is a big I think the pressure's all on him, right? Because he has all those advantages and everything like that. But you look at Zach Taylor, this is his best chance to win a Super Bowl because I still have my question marks on him and those kinds of things. And I think just getting that one, I think will just help, him get a future job again. So,
right. Yeah,
it'll be a great game. Great halftime show as well. Halftime show is gonna be nuts.
Oh, this is my favorite. This is the most excited I've been for a halftime show in a very long time. And you know what? We're talking about the Zach Taylor, the Sean McVay types. Everyone talks about that Washington football team staff from 2013. Let's talk about another member of that staff, new Miami Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel. Vinny, I know this was something that we all kind of thought in the back of our minds was certainly a strong possibility all offseason. Last offseason, the Miami Dolphins interviewed Mike McDaniel to be their offensive coordinator. The 49ers elevated him to offensive coordinator to keep him from the Dolphins. But ultimately, in the end, the Dolphins, they get their guy, their offensive coach of the future. And I think the first thing that stuck out to me was Kyle Juszczyk's comments. And he put out on Twitter that he thought Mike McDaniel was the most creative, best run game designer in the league. And he was saying that above a guy like Kyle Shanahan. So this is a guy who, if you're a Miami Dolphins fan, you can certainly expect the Dolphins to implement a lot of what the 49ers do in terms of the running game, the diversity of it, heavy elements of the outside and inside zone. It's going to be really interesting for a guy like Mike McDaniel, who hasn't play called before, Vinny, but now he gets to put his own stamp on his own franchise. And with Miami, obviously they're going through a lot of turmoil right now. It's a weird situation. They just fired a head coach at back-to-back winning seasons. Obviously, there's a lawsuit going on with Brian Flores that's ongoing at this point. But for Mike McDaniel, this might be the only opportunity you would have gotten. I mean, who really knows how this would have happened? Briefly, though, for the 49ers side of things, they get 2 third-round picks because Mike McDaniel is a minority candidate. He is biracial. The 49ers get a third-round compensatory pick this season, actually. Which I knew was a big question. So it's big next season, or this season and the next season. And now the 49ers are going to have 4 top 130 picks instead of just 3, which they had before this hiring. So obviously it helps them out in terms of the NFL draft. That's going to be huge for the 49ers. But how much do you worry about this loss of Mike McDaniel, Vinny? Because I think while he's not a play caller necessarily, I think there are those who would point to the run game, the first 15 plays of even though Mike McDaniel isn't calling those first 15 plays of the game, he certainly has to be heavily involved in them. This is a guy who, like I was saying, we're going to see how he can put his own stamp on it, but I wonder, it's going to be interesting to see how this really affects the 49ers, because we all talk about Kyle Shanahan as the mastermind. Well, we're gonna find out, right? He doesn't have any of there's not really anyone left from this initial staff that he brought on. So for Mike, he gets to go and prove himself on his own. But for a guy like Kyle, I see this as a new not a new challenge of sorts, but a different challenge, one that you didn't have to deal with the last few seasons.
Yeah. I'm not too concerned about the move. I think we talked about it before in the sense that, and kind of like what EQ mentions here, I think we've seen Kyle Shanahan advocate for his guys getting those head coaching jobs when they're, when they want them. And that's kind of where I'm not too concerned about it, because he always finds the way to find guys that replace him and fill in for those, lacking spots. And, he made one hire recently that we'll get into here in a bit that I think is going to, help bridge that gap a little bit. But to your point really here that you had, previously mentioned, I'm not too concerned in the sense that it's hard to really put a label on how much Mike McDaniel had a say in the offense. I think this was more of, Shanahan's creation and everything like that. So that's where I'm not really too concerned on that end. But I think you do bring up a good point, though. Like, this is his first, time without Mike McDaniel, without Mike LaFleur as well. Two guys that, they really, heavily relied on that. It'll take some adjusting, but I think, one name that has gone up for potential replacement as the offensive coordinator is Pep Hamilton.
Bobby Slovic is the other name I know is heavily involved.
Yeah, and I think those are two, I trust Shanahan. He's hired, what seems to, I think
he has a great track record. I mean,
he has a great track record of finding those guys. And,
Absolutely.
Two of those, I think it's safe to say by the end of next year, he'll have 3 coaches in the span of 3 years getting head coaching jobs, right? Like Robert Saleh, Mike McDaniel, probably D'Amico Ryans next year.
D'Amico Ryans,
and then we talked about, Joe Woods as well, getting that promotion from being the defensive backs coach to being a defensive coordinator, those kinds of things as well. So that's where he knows good coaching. And I don't think I have too much concerns on that end, but I think they will miss Mike McDaniel, though. Not to say that but I don't think they'll miss him as much in the sense that, again, Kyle Shanahan is kind of like the guy, with all of these thoughts and ideas and everything like that. And he maybe won't be able to play those ideas off as much, which may impact it a little bit. But I think it also helps knowing that they're in the complete opposite conference on the complete opposite side of the country as well. So
yeah, I mean, think about the relationship with Matt LaFleur, right? And even Sean McVay. It's a situation where, Kyle can still be friendly with those guys. He can still certainly have the relationship that he might want to have with those guys, but he can't confide the same way that they used to when they were part of his own staffs, right? Or even a part of other team staff where they weren't the head coach, because in these situations, they're your direct competitors. Guys like Sean McVay, you're facing twice a year. Matt LaFleur, right? You're going to be facing him almost every single year. I mean, the NFL loves that 49ers-Packers matchup. So with Miami Dolphins, obviously that's a team you only play every 4 seasons, I believe. With the way the NFL schedule works. This is someone that hopefully Kyle Shanahan can still confide with, can still have those conversations with, where maybe he's not quite as honest as he is with a Sean McVay, right?
Yeah.
So there is that hope for that. But at the end of the day, like you said, he is going to revamp this staff. And we'll certainly talk about Anthony Lynn in our next topic, who just got hired by the 49ers. But I think we have confidence in Kyle's ability to put together a coaching staff. He has a great track record, like I was saying. But with Mike McDaniel, I think, hats off to him. It's great for him.
Yeah.
And we'll really see Mike McDaniel's impact once he is a head coach with the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah.
If he is the play caller for
invest
them,
in
who
the
he hires.
Invest in the Myles Gaskin and Jalen Waddle stock.
Oh, yeah.
I think
Oh,
those are
yeah.
the two guys that you look at that could really have a big impact. And I think another interesting point, we always like to talk about 49ers quarterbacks, right?
No.
Hold on.
No.
I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'm just saying,
not even possible.
Does he have to make a decision as to who he wants at that quarterback? And I'm not saying he's going to go there or anything like that. But
I'll tell you why, Vinny. I'll tell you why this isn't even a conversation. It's because I think the part of the reason Brian Flores isn't there anymore is because he didn't believe in Tua the same way the owner believed in Tua, the same way the GM believed in Tua. So I think this is a situation where maybe in other cases, yeah, you would say, hey, Jimmy, go join the guy who you can go run his offense. Go do that. You can be a backup, whatever, figure that out. But with Tua, first of all, they like I said, they've committed so much to him, but then he's a hell of a lot cheaper than Jimmy Garoppolo is.
No,
right?
no, and I agree with that. I'm not saying that he is going to go there or anything like
but
that. That's just
what I'm saying though is that Miami
past,
ownership has set this up a specific way where their ownership and their front office is all in on Tua. I mean, they're the reason Mike McDaniel part of the reason he got this job, I'm assuming, is because he wants to work with Tua, because I think that's what the Miami Dolphins were looking for. In fact, it seems like the Miami Dolphins will keep a lot of their coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball. They're keeping their defensive coordinator, a lot of their position coaches on that side of the ball. So to me, with the Miami Dolphins, this whole situation has always been they wanted an offensive guy. I mean, look at all the candidates that they were in on, right? They were clearly offensively focused. I think, to me, this hire was all about Tua, maximizing what they can get out of him. So I think for McDaniel, that's the expectation, right? One thing I do want to touch on before we move on to Anthony Lynn, Vinny, is who do one thing I think we could see change because of this is you talk about players potentially going to the Miami Dolphins, Raheem Mostert, Laken Tomlinson, DJ Jones, even potentially. I know he's not an offensive guy, right? But still, the one thing, though, that I think is interesting is that he could go and steal some coaches from the 49ers. They have quarterback coach Rich Scangarello. And I know that Miami offensive staff is going to need to be overhauled. So it's certainly an interesting situation where, like we saw with the Richard Hightower departure for the 49ers, it seems like the 49ers knew he was eventually going to be the Bears special team coordinator, and they let that situation happen rather than fire him, let him go through the process and deal with that. So they could be in a very similar situation where the team all knows this is where this was headed, and he's going to pick this guy and this position coach and this personnel person, and he's definitely going to take some people with him. So I'm interested to see who he picks and chooses, and if the 49ers already have ready replacements for those people, because it certainly seems like a big part of the next hire we're about to talk about was the fact that the 49ers were anticipating Mike McDaniels being the Dolphins head coach.
Yeah, and I think we saw a little bit of that with Robert Saleh. I think there's similar conversations. I think they only ended up taking – I don't think they took any players. Like, there were a lot of players that were rumored to go those places. They didn't take any of the players, but they did take the offensive line coach, I believe. His name is John Benton, if I'm not mistaken. So, maybe you see that. Take some of those guys going forward. Maybe – he takes Embry. He's got an open spot now. So who knows? It'll be interesting to see. And you feel happy for Mike McDaniel getting this opportunity to show what he is as a head coach. And maybe if he doesn't have that success that he wanted, I think Shanahan kind of knows, like, hey, there's always a spot here if you need to come back. So.
Absolutely. And I think that's how 49ers fans feel about the situation too. But we got to talk about the guy who seems like if he's not the one-to-one replacement for Mike McDaniel, he's certainly the biggest coaching change that the 49ers have made this offseason. It's the hiring of new assistant head coach of the 49ers, Anthony Lynn. Obviously, you touched on the John Embry situation. They fired John Embry, or asked him to take a pay cut. There are still rumors about how that whole situation went down. I think for the 49ers hiring Anthony Lynn, the hope is that this takes part of the offensive workload that maybe we saw McDaniel and LaFleur before have, and part of that can be now Anthony Lynn's part of what he does for the 49ers. And I think what 49ers fans need to understand about this hire is Anthony Lynn is a very run-focused individual. He's a very run-focused head coach. In fact, when he was a head coach, his teams had some of the best seasons they've had. He's had players have some of the best seasons they've had under him in terms of running the ball. So he's someone who obviously was a former player, has background with the San Francisco 49ers, right? But this is a great hire, Vinny. This is someone who I think we talked about all season. Who was that coach who could come into the room and tell Kyle Shanahan, you need to do it differently. You need to look at this differently. You need to have a different perspective. I think there was a sense from a lot of people that maybe Kyle surrounds himself with a lot of yes men, a lot of people who are telling Kyle Shanahan, hey, like Mike McDaniel or Mike LaFleur, you're doing great at what you're doing. I love what you're doing, Kyle. We subscribe to your philosophy. Now you bring in someone who obviously is going to have a lot of gravity towards him. He's a great individual leader as well. I mean, really, he's a leader of men. This is someone who I think offers a different perspective in the locker room. But like I said, Vinny, he really is going to help this run game for the 49ers. He's going to be a big part of what they do in terms of running the ball next season.
Yeah, I think this is a really great hire in the sense, too, that it's not in the role of like a head coach. And he saw some success as a head coach, too, but he's kind of like that second voice. I feel like he's a little bit more of like an established voice as well that, players have respect for and that they can rely on for, those other advice. And that's a good point that you bring up too. Anthony Lynn won't be afraid to tell Kyle Shanahan what's not working well. And not to say that those other guys weren't either, but like, we don't know. But I think, seeing how Anthony Lynn carries himself, he's going to be a guy that's going to ask a lot of his players. And, there's that one quote that he had that was like, have fun, right? I think he wants players to have fun and that kind of thing. So I think that's just another unique perspective that he'll bring to this locker room that I think, will only benefit this team.
Yeah, and I mean, Barry Baller pointed out what I was just talking about. There is that familiarity between Anthony Lynn, the Shanahans. I think even Kyle, Vinny, I remember saying that he was a ball boy and he followed Anthony Lynn around and he was one of his favorite players and he learned from him the most. So obviously Anthony Lynn is very well respected. And he is going to have that gravity, like we've been talking about, that respect that maybe a Mike McDaniel, who, like Brandon Ayuk said, he didn't even really know who he was up until this past year. Those assistants, they might not have the same impression that an Anthony Lynn is going to have on players. These players will absolutely respect Anthony Lynn. And I think for Kyle moving forward, it's going to be interesting to see how the run game does change, how it does evolve, right? Because I think people think of McDaniel as maybe that creative, or at least a part of that creative process of all the different things we've been seeing, like putting Trent Williams in motion, using Kyle Juszczyk the way they do Debo, obviously. But Anthony Lynn can certainly help the 49ers develop their run game even further and take a lot of that load off from Kyle that, we don't want Kyle to be dealing with as much offense. He needs to be more of that CEO, right? That's what we want from him. We still want him play calling. We still want him doing his thing. But this is going to help take the load off from Kyle.
Yeah, and I think, a few points on that. I think with that motion stuff that you were talking about, I think there were times where the running game got a little too cute, I think. And whereas Anthony Lynn can kind of just bring more of like a solidified, just run down your throat kind of approach that won't change as much of what the 49ers will have to change as much. And I think one thing that I think could maybe raise a bit of concern with this hire is just at times we saw Anthony Lynn get a little conservative with some of the play calling. And we've seen some similarities with Kyle Shanahan as well. And
I
there
was
have been
about to
times
say,
where, and there have
Kyle
been times,
Shanahan and
yeah,
Anthony Lynn cooking up those late game, end of game, time clock management
yeah.
situations.
And
I don't
I
know if I
think
love that.
another thing that I've liked that I saw in Anthony Lynn's last year with the Chargers that could maybe be potentially a problem this year, and I don't know, like he may not as much say in the play calling or things like that, but there were times where they kind of ran Justin Herbert to the ground a little bit.
Yeah.
And there particularly those like that Raiders game where they ran like 2-3 straight QB sneaks, and you're like, dude, this guy's like our franchise, and he's getting these hits to the head. Like, let's make some better play calls and things like that. So that, of course, we haven't seen it yet, but with Trey Lance coming into the fold now, how does he kind of change the way that what did he take from coaching Justin Herbert that he'll take to coaching Trey Lance? And one other final quick thing that I think will be good, and this is like a personal like kind of like pet peeve of mine, I guess, when it comes to like coordinators in the NFL. I don't like it when, and I don't think I've ever seen Anthony Lynn in the booth, but there's just something about like a coordinator being in a booth that just like it's a weird superstition thing for me. Like a coordinator in a booth, like, and like you mentioned, like Brandon Ayuk not knowing who Mike McDaniel was. Mike McDaniel spent a lot of the time in the booth.
That's true.
So like,
that's true.
and I know it's like sounds like stupid and anything like that, but like maybe having more of like the personable connection with his players could serve as a benefit to this team going forward, and creating more of that interaction with them, I think could be beneficial as well. So it'll be interesting to see how it all goes. And I think this hire just comes to show that the 49ers, like you mentioned, were prepared and they did their homework, and they didn't just bring in any guy and panic just because they, felt like they needed to. They wanted to get the right guy, and I think they did in getting Anthony Lynn.
Well, and people have often mentioned Pep Hamilton right after the Anthony Lynn hiring. Everyone's talking about Tyrod Taylor, Pep Hamilton becoming a part of the 49ers. One thing I actually don't know if the 49ers will be able to bring in Pep Hamilton. It already seems like he's going to be offered the offensive coordinator position at Houston, which he's already the quarterback's coach for, with Lovie Smith getting that job. And really, Pep Hamilton is probably the most sought after quarterback coach, offensive coach, assistants on the market right now. So it'd be tough for them to bring him in. Obviously, it would be amazing if they did, though, because you want to talk about someone who benefits Trey Lance's development. I think Pep Hamilton would be a great hire in terms of that. But even then, like we've seen with Anthony Lynn, developing these young quarterbacks, dealing with Tyrod Taylor, winning with him, it's going to be interesting to see the effect he has on this team moving forward. And I know there's some more coaching changes as well, Vinny, right? We saw the departure of Richard Hightower. He was hired by the Bears as their special teams coordinator. First things first is the 49ers may receive a compensatory pick for that as well, because under the rules for the NFL's minority hiring, the new rules that they've implemented for pick compensation, if you hire a coach for the same position that he's already in with the current team, then you receive an additional third-round pick. So not only do the 49ers get 2 third-round picks with Mike McDaniel, but if Richard Hightower was still under contract with the 49ers when the Bears made that hire, they'll receive a third-round compensatory pick this offseason. 2 off seasons in a row, actually, that they've done that now, getting Martin Mayhew hired the last hiring cycle, and Robert Saleh, of course. But between that and also the firing of John Embry, who, as we saw, that was most likely a move in anticipation of Anthony Lynn hiring. What do you make of Richard Hightower leaving? What do you make of the John Embry situation, which was such an odd situation last week? And do you think there are going to be more changes to this coaching staff?
I think that's just hard to say. Who knows? I think if you can get a guy like Pep Hamilton, you definitely want to try to get him. As you saw the developments that he's had with obviously a guy like Andrew Luck in the past, and think even more impressive, kind of like what Splash Cousin tweeted the other day. I think it was yesterday. What he was able to do with Davis Mills, I think, is even more impressive.
Yeah.
So maybe those are some other guys that they bring in. The Hightower hiring, I don't think that's anything to be too concerned about.
In fact, I know 49ers fans did not want Hightower to be a part of the staff moving forward. And I think, obviously the Green Bay game was really, that was his crowning achievement. Maybe that's why the Bears hired him. They saw that game and they thought to themselves, hey, this is what we want to do against the Packers. But Vinny, this special teams group was the worst unit of the 49ers all season long. Really, they were the weakness of the team in multiple games, and they even, I think you could argue, lost this team a few games during the season. People wanted Rich Bisaccia to be the next special teams coordinator. He already got hired by the Green Bay Packers. I know Joe Judge is a name that's brought up in terms of that position, which I don't know how I
wouldn't mind it, honestly. I wouldn't mind it.
Just, hey, as long as he doesn't go for it on 3rd and 9, I'm cool. But or QB sneak on 3rd and 9. It's going to be interesting though to see how they fill these spots moving forward, Vinny, because like I was saying, there could be more changes too with Mike McDaniel trying to poach guys for his own staff.
Yeah, and the Embry thing I think is it is interesting. I think I've never seen like a position coach asked to have a 60%
pay cut. That's insane.
A lot. But clearly there was a reason why they asked for that, and I originally people thought of it as like it was like a race issue and things like that. I don't think it was as much, considering that they replaced him as the associate coach with another African American coach, but who knows? Honestly, like I think it's hard to, especially in this climate today, kind of just like point at those certain things without knowing.
Well, and I think the timing of the Brian Flores lawsuit, and then
that's another thing too.
The John Embry firing immediately afterwards certainly didn't paint a good light.
And they should be held accountable for that if it did end up being like a race thing, because I think there was there's the one female coach that they had last year that they had
Katie Sowers. Yeah, they let go Katie Sowers, the wide receiver assistant.
Yeah, there was a similar thing. Like there were questions about that as well, and with the team's history with how they handled the Kaepernick situation, which was obviously a newer, different one. A lot of this has kind of like been surrounded this team like in the background. So I don't know enough details to whether to say it was because of race or not. I don't suspect it to be.
Yeah, and we shouldn't speculate on the John Embry thing, but I will say in terms of diversity for Kyle Shanahan is I think since he's got hired, he's shown a great track record of a commitment to not only hiring minority assistants, but promoting them to positions to where they can get potential future head coaching jobs, like John just mentioned in the comments with Robert Saleh and McDaniels, and that could be 3 added to the list with the hiring of DeMeco Ryans, which we are all anticipating at some point because DeMeco Ryans is such a great coach and he should get that opportunity next.
Yeah.
So I certainly don't think it's for lack of diversity that we should we shouldn't overlook the situation with John Embry. I certainly think it's worth investigating. And I hope the good journalists in the Bay Area look into that situation a little bit more and kind of find out if there is that larger story there, because I remember his wife was tweeting about the whole situation after it happened. And there was it didn't seem like a great breakup in terms of the two. So we certainly should hopefully know more about the details of that moving forward. Maybe, like I said, some journalists can get their hands on that. But we have spent a lot of time on coaching changes news. One of the things that Vinny and I wanted to talk about today, though, and specifically as we head towards free agency, the draft, everyone's trying to decide what players should the 49ers keep, what positions do they need to upgrade. first off, we wanted to talk about the biggest positions of need, really, for this team moving forward. And I think what we're going to do, Vinny, is I'll pick a position, you'll pick a position, then I'll pick one more, and we'll each do two. And for me, when I'm looking at positions of need, Vinny, I think there are a few things that come to people's minds immediately. Like the right side of the offensive line, for example. Maybe depth at running back or along that defensive line. But to me, I go to the secondary first, Vinny. And I think while there are many that have been calling for the 49ers, go get another cornerback, right? I think their outside corner situation is very good, actually, Vinny. In fact, I think they have their two starters already in Ambry Thomas and Emmanuel Mosley. Those guys are going to be the two outside starting corners for the 49ers. We saw their success at the end of the season. The one spot I think this team needs a replacement in, and you know what? Everyone in the comments below, let us know, what are your biggest positions of need? For me, number one, Vinny, it's nickel cornerback. And that slot role that we saw K'Wan Williams has been playing in for the 49ers. We talked about it multiple times on our show, Vinny, throughout the postseason, even heading into the postseason, that, you know what, K'Wan Williams does an excellent job run fitting. He does very good in his slot role, but he's gotten consistently burned on these deep vertical stretching routes in coverage, where players just take the top off the defense, and he just doesn't have the speed to keep up with those guys vertically. So Vinny, I think, to me, nickel corner is the number one position that if I can get a new player in and replace it and upgrade it for the 49ers, replacing K'Wan Williams would be number one on my list, because even while there are some who may be okay with bringing back K'Wan, he is a free agent. He's going to be relatively cheap. It's not going to take a lot of assets to retain him. I think they need to go in a new direction with this, and specifically the draft. There are going to be many opportunities in the spots that they're picking. The Nebraska corner in the third round, I think, would be an excellent pick. The Houston corner, Jason Petrie, the Baylor safety / slot corner. There are going to be options for the 49ers where they're picking, and obviously now they get an extra pick with Mike McDaniel in that third round, in that spot where they could be potentially taking that player. I think slot corner, to me, is the number one position that I would be looking at.
Yeah, and I think they have a bit more flexibility to do those kinds of moves because of the comp picks that they're getting.
Absolutely.
And I don't think it's a bad thing that K'Wan Williams comes back, but I think, to your point, I think they could be okay going in a different direction, especially with Williams getting older. The position that I look at, they only have two players in this position currently on the roster, and they are Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. Otherwise, there are no other wide receivers on this team.
Isn't Trent Sherfield on the team next season, or is that?
I think it was a one-year deal. Okay. Trent was a one-year deal, I think. So
and just so everybody knows, I believe Juwan Williams, Juwan Jennings. Sorry, not Williams. Juwan Jennings is an exclusive rights free agent. Yeah. So he's, unless someone wants to trade for him, he will be a 49.
Yeah, but I think you look at those other spots, especially with this, new emergence of Trey Lance. I think there's a different scheme fit that you kind of have to potentially look for in terms of your receivers. And
you're right. Trent Sherfield, only a one-year deal. He's just a straight-up free agent this offseason.
Yeah, and like Travis Benjamin won't be there. Mohamed Sanu. Like, those are like 3-4 guys that you got to fill out. River Craycraft may not be back. Those kinds of things too. So, like, what do you look to kind of build in those particular spots going forward? I think they'll keep. I think Juwan Jennings will be back next year, and those will be your top 3 guys. But who are going to be your guys when one of those guys gets hurt? Like, do you look into the draft? And that's just where they can find some of these, guys earlier in these like higher round picks. Like, I think a name that's been always surrounded the Niners recently has been Christian Walker. Is that his name?
Yeah, the North Dakota State receiver who is a senior. 6'4", 4'3" type speed. This is a guy who played a lot with Trey Lance, obviously.
Christian Watson.
Christian Watson. And he had an excellent Senior Bowl, Vinny. I think almost every single matchup from the second day on, he won. So, yeah, it was very, very impressive.
Yeah, and so that's where I think I'll kind of go receiver, just because there's not a lot of them on the roster, and you got to kind of think about those other guys that could fill in if Debo or Ayuk were to get hurt next year, because Shanahan has come out and said he's not going to change the usage for Debo Samuel.
Nor should he. And I think for me, Vinny, the next position I immediately think about in terms of need, it's center, because we talked about this on our show last week. There's no guarantee that Alex Mack is going to be back next season. Even if he is, how can you rely on him in terms of the long term of that position? The reality is that I think the 49ers are in an okay spot in terms of the guards position if they bring back Laken Tomlinson, right? If Laken Tomlinson comes back, you just have to figure out what you're doing at right guard, really. And moving forward, the center position is a thing where, look, I'm not saying Alex Mack is going to get hurt, but if you can put yourself in a position where you bring in a new center, maybe he's a developmental guy or a guy in free agency who's on another team who's a backup, someone who you feel confident about for the future, you can get them getting that chemistry with Trey Lance at the beginning of his career, at the beginning of him getting all these first team reps, right? So in terms of the development for Trey Lance and in terms of the long-term future of the 49ers, the center position is one of the most important positions on Kyle Shanahan's offense in general. So I think for me, even though you do have some present at the spot with a guy like Alex Mack, figuring out the future right now at that center position to me is going to be very, very important for Trey Lance.
Yeah, and that's a fair concern to bring up too, just because Alex Mack is getting up there in age, and Alex Mack is not going to be Trey Lance's center for his whole career. So you want to try to get that guy that can create that relationship with him.
And who knows, Vinny, if he retires this offseason, the 49ers are going to need to fill that spot immediately. So even if it's not this season, you're going to have to do it within the next 2 seasons.
Yeah, exactly. The other position of need that I think the team needs to address is defensive end on the other side of Nick Bosa. I just don't know. It's looking likely that D Ford won't be back. I think that's potentially safe to say. And
yeah, they can cut D Ford and save money pre or post June 1st. So it's a situation where unless D Ford's going to come back and he's going to play all 16 games, it doesn't seem likely the team will retain him.
Yeah, and looking at potentially not getting back Arden Key, that could leave a hole open on that side. And I think seeing what the Niners did this past season with moving Eric Armstead more on the interior, I think they want to stick with that going forward.
Well, and I think, Vinny, even beyond, I think really what you're saying is they need a versatile defensive lineman, because while you're going to need someone to fill those edge spots, and this is certainly something I've been thinking about a lot recently in terms of the draft for the 49ers, they do have some nice, pure edge guys in terms of Charles Omenihu, right? Jordan Willis. They have some
Samson Ebukam.
Samson Ebukam, totally forgot. They have guys where you're very comfortable with them going into next season. But if you could add another player who can play that edge, who can play inside, who can move along the defensive line, that's a level of versatility that the 49ers could really need moving forward. Obviously, Beacom pointed that out in the comments. DJ Jones could walk. You don't really know what you're going to be getting from Javon Kinlaw moving forward. Like you said, they moved Eric Armstead inside, but then Arden Key, a guy who you're moving inside and out, if they lose him, they absolutely need to draft the edge position, because as we saw, Vinny, this defensive line for the 49ers, you cannot have enough players. You just can't. And not only that, but adding a guy who has a variety of skill sets will only bring the best out of them, because we know Chris Kusarik is the best defensive line coach in the league. There's no one better than him. He's going to get the most out of these guys. So having a really deep room, even though while you might not say, Vinny, this is a need for the team, I think this is one of the bigger needs in terms of team building, right? Because we saw how the 49ers are able to utilize those waves of defensive linemen, those 8-9 man deep defensive lines. By the end of the season, we're just completely dominating offensive fronts.
Yeah, and that's going to be a key thing, especially if I think DJ Jones is a guy they have to bring back.
They absolutely have to bring back
one of those top guys, like in terms of like guys you want to bring back that were on the team last year. He's one of those guys. But if they are to let him go and he does play for a different team, I think, like you mentioned, adding more of that depth to that defensive line isn't going to hurt them in any way.
No, and I think, one more position I just want to throw out as an honorable mention, Vinny. You can throw
quarterback?
out any of quarterback.
I'm kidding.
No,
maybe backup.
Well, that's a good point, and certainly a lot of people were talking about Tyrod Taylor, right, as that potential backup once they saw Anthony Lynn hired. But to me, Vinny, the one other position you really got to think about is that strong safety spot. I know a lot of people like Talanoa Hufanga. I know he's a fan favorite, but he has just not proven himself in coverage. In fact, I think he's very unreliable in coverage. So if you want to just go into the season with Jimmy Ward and Talanoa Hufanga, that's a huge mistake. Obviously, Jaquiski Tartt is a free agent, but Vinny, if the 49ers could go get a versatile type defensive back, right? Jason Petrie is the name I think of in terms of the draft. The Baylor guy, he played safety, he played slot corner, he played outside. He's a guy who actually similar to Jimmy Ward, and when you look at his comparisons, he's played all over the field. So if you can get a player like that in who can plug in multiple spots, obviously like slot and strong safety, then that would be immense for this franchise because you already have Jimmy Ward.
Yeah. And I don't know you can't really guarantee what you're going to get from Tarvarius Moore as well.
No.
Tarvarius Moore coming back off that torn ACL, and he had some bright spots, I think, in that 1 year where he got a little bit more of that PT, but coming off that ACL tear, I think that's something that you may not necessarily want to rely on, and I think the safe option for them is just bringing back Jaquiski Tartt.
Probably, right? And I think they'll probably –
he's another one of those big players that they need to bring back too.
Yeah, well, and I think what they'll do, again, what they did last season, Vinny, is they'll try and draft his replacement again. I think that's what's going to happen. That's how I see this situation playing out because like we saw with Tartt, his injury history, I just think precludes him from getting the kind of contract that he feels he probably deserves in terms of getting a long-term deal. So yeah, obviously a guy like Hufanga, he can put in the comments, he considers himself a special teamer. It's not a guy who's going to be reliable in coverage. Maybe you can convert him to a smaller, linebacker, that type in the box type player, that sort of role. But even when we saw Talanoa Hufanga play towards the end of the season, Vinny, I specifically remember seeing him in coverage sets with Tartt and with Jimmy Ward. So this isn't a guy they necessarily trust the way they might want to. And I think it's clear they'll probably go in that different direction this offseason. If not, going a different direction from Tartt, they'll at least bring someone in who they feel if they lose Tartt, they can replace him with. So I think for us, those are probably the biggest positions, Vinny. I'm trying to think if there's anything else you could say, interior offensive line, you could certainly make a case for. Obviously, we didn't see what happened with Aaron Banks this past season. And maybe even, that swing tackle spot, maybe Jalen Moore is a very good player, but who knows how they feel about him right now. I think for the offensive line, though, they're going to have a lot of options, but it's going to be interesting to see. Do they want to go after a center in the draft? Do they want to go after a guard in the draft? Because they could certainly do so. And I mean, I think
and if they need to, they can just draft a kicker in the third round. So they may need a kicker.
They can.
They may need a kicker. I'm being serious here. I'm not saying pick him in the third round, but Robbie Gould's getting up there in age. So maybe they look to get a kicker. I don't know.
Well, and I know one of the greatest punting prospects in recent history is going to be in the draft. The kid who had the 90-yard punt this past season in college football. So, hey, if the 49ers...
Hey, but I just want to say, too...
Wisnowski replacement,
I just want to say, a lot of people, obviously, the optics look crazy taking a punter in the fourth round. considering other players that they've had. That
Vinny, you're not about to defend them.
No,
Mitch
I'm just saying
Wisnowski.
it's not as bad of a pick as it turned out to be. Mitch Wisnowski is not a bad punter.
No,
but do you take him? The question is,
Vinny, unless he's Justin Tucker, the Justin Tucker of punters, there's absolutely no way you can justify that, man.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying it's not as bad as people make it out to be. They've had worse draft picks than him.
Fair enough. You know what?
They've had. Trust me, AJ Jenkins, terrible pick. Remember Marcus? What was his name? Marcus Lattimore.
Yeah.
Or Marshawn, the running back from South Carolina.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. There's certainly been worse.
There have been way worse picks. Jalen Hurd didn't even play a regular season game for the 49ers, and he was the round before. They've had worse picks. They've had worse picks than Mitch Wisnowski at that 4th round. I will live by that. I will live by that.
Maybe.
You just can't draft. You can't draft like first guys that you drafted in rounds before you drafted him, and they didn't even play. That can't be a worse pick than taking this guy.
I would tell you, though, that the 49ers, some of their best picks, though, are the 4th, 5th, 6th round. So
yeah, remember Joshua Garnett? Yeah, second round pick.
I do.
Lattimore did have that bad leg injury, but was that before? I think that was before or after they drafted him. I don't know. Joe Williams, another guy, 4th round.
Yeah, terrible.
Oh. Solomon Thomas, come on. There have been worse picks than
I still don't think it was
in the 4th round.
I still, if I could go back in time, I would still tell whoever made that pick, don't make it. Because why?
Oh, no, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying it's not as bad as other picks that they made. They made worse picks.
I can certainly understand that, but at the end of the day, picking a punter is picking a punter. You know, you know what? And I feel that's kind of a natural endpoint for us to say. I think that's where we're going to end things, everybody.
Draft a kicker in the 2nd round. That's what we're saying.
2nd round, your first pick, you need to draft a kicker. Everyone, Vinny and I, we will be back next Monday talking 49ers, of course. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I put all of Vinny's information in the description below. Check out his Twitter, check out his YouTube and the work he's been doing. Also, shout out to Mr. Roscoe's Chris for making the background and getting everything set up. This is a gorgeous background, Chris. He did an amazing job with it. His Twitter is in the link in my bio. Give him a shout out. Give him some love for this. And tomorrow, everyone, Shanalytics is officially back and rolling, and we're going to keep things rolling for the entire offseason. We got Rob Shue tomorrow at this time, actually. Well, 6 p.m. Eastern, so about 25 minutes before now tomorrow. I'll have Rob Shue on, so make sure you keep track of that on my Twitter. I'll be putting out all the information for that. I appreciate everyone sticking around for this entire hour. Vinny, what a season for the 49ers. Obviously, like we said, Super Bowl, very exciting. We'll see you guys all next week. We appreciate the time as always, and peace out.
Peace.